Okay, so I'm going to start talking through the answers from the practice test for Unit 1. So let's start with number 1. If E is the midpoint of segment DF, DE is equal to x squared plus 4x plus 4, and EF equals 16, what is the positive value of x? So they're hinting here that there might be two values for x. We know that there could be two values for x because we have a quadratic here. So we start with a picture like this where E is in the middle. We can use that because it is the midpoint. And then before we know that x squared plus 4x plus 4 is going to equal 16. So that's the equation we write here. The next thing we're going to do is subtract 16 from both sides to get that quadratic, x squared plus 4x minus 12 equals 0. And then you have one of two ways that you can try to solve this. One way is to factor it into x plus 6 times x minus 2, or over here I've shown the work for the quadratic formula. So as you can see, if you factor it, your two answers would have been -6 or +2, the two values that would yield 0 in this equation. Or if you use the quadratic formula, and my -6 got cut off here, but you would have had 2 or -6 as well, and that obviously x equals 2 would have been the positive value. Oops, it's a little too far there. Okay, looking at number 2, look at the figure at the right. ZY bisects angle XCR, and the measure of angle XCR is equal to 160. Okay, so that right from there, we can say that, okay, this whole angle here is 160, so if I bisect it, if I cut it in half, each of those is 80 degrees. We're also given that RZP is 105, so to find the measure of angle YZP, again, trace it with your finger. YZP, I would add 80 degrees to 105 degrees to get 185 for number 2. For number 3, points D, E, and F are collinear with point E between points D and F. If DF equals 11x plus 22, DE equals 9x plus 10, and EF equals 30, what is the value of x? Probably the hardest thing to do is to come up with the picture here. So if you come up with the picture that we have right here, which is 9x plus 10 being DE, 30 being EF, and remember, E is between points D and F, so that's why this picture is valid. And now we have the 9x plus 10 plus 30 will equal 11x plus 22. That's the equation that's written here. And then we just have to solve for x. So after we solve for x, we get x is equal to 9, and the problem is finished. Don't forget to read carefully. So for example, if I had said, what is DF, you would have had to plug 9 back into the equation to solve. Okay, for number 4, lines N and M are parallel. The measure of angle 7 is 2x. The measure of angle 5 is 5x plus 5. What is the measure of angle 8? So let's look at the relationship between these two. 7 and 5 form a linear pair, which means that they add up to be 180 degrees. So there's the equation that we're going to write there. We make our substitutions, and we solve for x. So we get x is equal to 25. We're not done there, though, because it asks for what's the measure of angle 8. So we need to substitute the 25 in for an angle that is equal to angle 8. So looking at our drawing here, angle 8 and angle 5 are congruent because they are vertical angles. So we write that measure of angle 5 is the same as measure of angle 8. So the measure of angle 8 is 5x plus 5. Substitute the 25 in for x, and you will get the measure of angle 8 as 130 degrees. Okay, next one. Okay, so for this next problem, you can see things got a little bit cut off up here. Points A, B, C, and D lie on a number line in alphabetical order. If A has coordinate -7.6, so that's that one up there. D has coordinate 5, so that one up there. And AB equals 1.5. So we can find out what the coordinate for B is by taking -7.6 plus 1.5 to find the coordinate for B, which would be negative 6.1. Then from point D, we're moving to the left 1.2 units. So to find the coordinate of point C, we would take the coordinate for D, which is 5, minus 1.2, which would be 3.8, and then we have the two coordinates, negative 6. I can't remember what that was. It was negative 6.1. So that coordinate is negative 6.1. This coordinate is 3.8. The distance between those two, from negative 6.1 to 3.8, would be 9.9. For our next problem, which of the following ways accurately names the line? There is more than one answer here. Notice that AB without the segment bar, without a line, that means the distance from A to B. Line L is an appropriate way of naming this line. Line AC, give me 2 points on the line and give me double arrows. That's an appropriate way of naming the line. Line BC is another appropriate way of naming the line. So these three, C, B, and D, are all appropriate ways of naming the line. For number 11, we have this figure. Looking at this figure, if the measure of angle 3 is 124.6, even though it doesn't look like it's 124.6, what's the measure of angle 4? I really just do not have enough information to go on here. If I had known, for example, that this was an angle bisector of this angle, then I probably could have solved the problem. But since I don't know that, I can't assume it. So just because it looks like this might be an angle bisector, I can't assume that that is true. So the answer is that there's not enough information. This cannot be determined. Okay, so in this problem, we're asked to write an equation for the line that passes through the point 1, 4 and is parallel to the graph of 6x minus 3y equals 2. Okay, so this is in the standard form of an equation of a line. So the first thing that we need to do is put it into slope-intercept form. So these are the steps to put it into slope-intercept form. We would essentially solve for y. So we're going to subtract 6x from both sides. We're going to divide both sides by negative 3, so both the negative 6 and the positive 2 get divided by negative 3, and we get the equation y equals 2x minus 2/3. This tells us that the slope is equal to 2. So, whoop, went a little too far there. So now that I know that the slope is equal to 2, and I want a line that is parallel to it, and goes through the point 1, 4, I can just substitute in 2 for the slope, and looks like we used the point slope formula here. So I'm going to put some different work over on the side, which is a little bit different than using the point slope form. Okay, so if you don't know how to use the point slope equation of a line, you can use y equals mx plus b and substitute in the information that you know. So for example, I know that the point 1, 4 is on the line. So I'm going to put 1 in for x, I'm going to put 4 in for y, and I just found out what the slope was, which is 2. So now once I solve for b, I get that b is equal to 2, and therefore the equation is y is equal to 2x plus 2. Okay, our next one, line A passes through the point 2, 3, and line B passes through the point 6, 3, and negative 2, 7, and is perpendicular to line A. Write an equation that describes line A. Okay, so the first thing I can do is figure out what the slope of line B is by using the formula for slope. I get that the slope of line B is negative 1/2. So the slope of a line that is perpendicular to negative 1/2 would be a slope that has the opposite reciprocal to negative 1/2, which would be 2. So the slope of line A is m equals 2. So here again we see the point slope formula. you don't have to do it this way. I'll put the other work over here. But essentially, you're doing the exact same thing. You're taking the point 2, 3, you're substituting 2 in for m, this will be substituted in for x, this will be substituted in for y, and essentially you're solving for b again. So I'll put that work down so that you can see it. Okay, so here's the work for that. So again, substituting in the point 2, 3, and the slope of 2, and then solving for b. Once you have b, you just substitute m and b back into y equals mx plus b to come up with the equation of your line. Okay, so here's number 15. So we have these two figures. We know that that this angle here is 22 degrees, which would make this angle 158 degrees. Notice that the figures are not drawn to scale. That looks like it could be even an obtuse angle, but it's labeled as 22 degrees. Okay? So now, angle B is a corresponding angle to this 150 degree angle, which means it has the same angle measure. Now, one thing that it doesn't tell you in the drawing, which we cannot assume, but it was just a mistake. You have to know that N is parallel to S in order to make that jump. You have to know that the lines are parallel in order to say that angle B is 150 degrees. But that's okay. We can go from here. It was just a tiny mistake, but that's no big deal. So we can find angle A by doing 180 minus 22 to get that one. Angle B is obviously 150 degrees. Add those two together and you get 308 degrees. Okay, for number 16. So we first have that angle 1 is 2x, angle 2 is 3x plus 4. The relationship between those two is that they form a linear pair. So the equation that I would write is angle 1 plus angle 2 is equal to 180. So we have 2x plus 3x plus 4 equals 180. Solve for x and we get x equals 35.2. We want to know what the measure of angle 3 is. So the measure of angle 3 will be the same as the measure of angle 1. So substitute in 35.2 for x, and we get 70.4. Now, if I look at this, I can see that angle 1 looks to be an obtuse angle, but again, notice that the figure is not drawn to scale. So from time to time, they might be trying to mess with you just to make sure that you're taking into consideration that the figures may not be 100% accurate of the problem. Alright, number 17. What's the slope of any line perpendicular to this line? Y equals negative 10x plus 17. Okay, so start with the negative 10. There's your slope. Its opposite reciprocal would be 1/10, positive 1/10, because this is negative 10 over 1. Flip it and take its opposite, and you get positive 1/10. Okay, here is circle O with diameter AC. That's a really important part. AC is a diameter, which means that the arc here, ADC, is 180 degrees. Okay, we want to find the measure of arc BDC. Now, on your paper, they told you that arc is 155 degrees, which would mean that BOA, angle BOA, is going to be 180 minus 25, or 180 minus 155, which is 25. So now, again, trace it with your finger, starting at B, going through D, and ending at C. That's the arc you're trying to find. So one way of doing it is to take 360 degrees minus the 155. That's one way of doing it. Or you could have done 25 plus 180 degrees and got the same answer of 205 degrees. Okay, number 22. You're asked to know which lines are parallel. So really what you have to do here is figure out what you can assume from these drawings. So for example, this is a 65-degree angle, so you can say that this is a 65-degree angle. Wait a minute. So the vertical angle to this 65-degree angle would be 65 degrees. Now check this out. This was 65, this is 43. If the lines are parallel, then the corresponding angles have to be equal. Well, for this angle here and 65 degrees, they wouldn't be equal. So that tells you that M and N are not parallel. Well, let's go and check N and O. Okay, well, if this is 137 degrees, then that makes this angle 43 degrees. And if this angle is 43 degrees, its corresponding angle is also 43 degrees. That tells us that N and O are parallel by the corresponding angles postulate. This is a good review of how to create an equilateral triangle. So if you have a segment AB, what you can do is create the circle that has the center at B and the radius of AB, and then also create the circle whose center is A with that same radius. So if you do that, you create two intersecting circles. You can pick either one of these points. This person chose to pick this point up here. So now we have a point that is on both circles. So point C is equidistant from point B. It is also equidistant from point A. It's a radius of both of these circles. And both of these circles have a radius of AB. So therefore, all three of these segments are congruent, and therefore you have an equilateral triangle. So when you're writing your summary of this, you would have to say something along the lines of point C is on both circles, so it is so CB is a radius of both circle A with radius AB and circle B with radius AB, so therefore all three segments are congruent to one another. And that pretty much wraps up this review video. So good luck. Make sure you go back over the problems that were in the review. They're going to be pretty darn close to your test. So good luck.